The film begins with a story about a guy named Yoonho who is really nice, but sometimes nice guys don't get the appreciation they deserve from girls. This is what happens to Yoonho. At that time, he tries really hard to be there for his girlfriend, but she ends up falling for someone else. This all begins when Yoonho comes back to Korea with his girlfriend, Chungkyung. They both want to start careers in music. When they get to Korea, they meet up with Junyoung, who is Yoonho's best friend. But Yoonho doesn't know that Junyoung and Chungkyung have feelings for each other that they've kept hidden. Now, after a long time apart, Chungkyung sees Junyoung again and remembers all the old feelings she had for him. Back when Junyoung went to America to show off his piano skills, Chungkyung was there too. She was so charmed by him that she kissed him, even though she was still with Yoonho and they were planning to get married. On the other hand, Yoonho was thrilled to see his best friend Junyoung again. They talked all night long, just like brothers do. During their chat, Yoonho mentioned he hoped Junyoung would join his music team. Everything seemed fine until the topic switched to Chungkyung. Junyoung's expression suddenly changed because he was hiding a big secret about her. Meanwhile, Chungkyung was always thinking about Junyoung. To her, it was as if Yoonho didn't really matter because Junyoung was the one she truly liked from the start. The next day, as Yoonho was helping Chungkyung get ready, he brought up his conversation from the night before with Junyoung. Junyoung had claimed that he didn't meet Chungkyung on his last trip to America for a music event. Curious, Chungkyung asked if Junyoung really said she wasn't there. This confused Yoonho, and he started wondering about what had actually happened. And Yoonho, without any suspicion, asked Chungkyung again if she really had been in America. She quickly said no and lied that she hadn't been there. She almost let it slip how upset Yoonho would be if he found out that she and Junyoung had kissed each other during that trip. Soon after, Chungkyung secretly met with Junyoung to talk about their feelings. However, thinking about Yoonho made her cautious because she still felt guilty. Unfortunately, the way she spoke led Junyoung to misunderstand her, making him feel let down, and he left her abruptly. Turns out, a woman named Song-ah saw this happen. At that time, Song-ah plays in an orchestra and was once helped by Junyoung. She dreams of becoming successful in music, but despite working hard day and night, she struggled to catch up. Song-ah tried many times to get into a music school, but kept getting rejected. Finally, she got into one. At this school, Song-ah was the oldest student, which made her stand out. The other, younger students often made fun of her or teased her because they thought she wasn't very good. However, Song-ah never let their words bother her, choosing instead to keep her feelings to herself. When she felt sad, she would spend time alone to think. During a really tough time in her life, Song-ah met Junyoung. She was at a rehearsal for an orchestra performance, and even though she was participating, she sat in the back. In an orchestra, where you sit often shows how skilled you are, and unfortunately, Song-ah was considered the least skilled. At that time, Junyoung arrived late to the rehearsal but still got a warm welcome from the conductor and even praise for his piano skills. Meanwhile, the conductor was not happy with the way Song-ah's violin sounded and told her it was ruining the performance. This was Song-ah's first time performing, and she quietly asked the conductor to give her another chance. Instead of understanding, the conductor scolded her harshly. Song-ah felt so upset and embarrassed as everyone watched her struggle to hold back tears. Seeing how sad she was, Junyoung cleverly dropped his book to distract everyone and ease the tension. The conductor stopped being angry, but Song-ah still had to leave. Soon after, one of Song-ah's friends came to congratulate her, not knowing that Song-ah wasn't going to perform. As they talked, Junyoung overheard and decided to step in. He complimented Song-ah right there in front of her friend, showing his support so she wouldn't feel like giving up. Her friend was really impressed that a famous pianist like Junyoung praised Song-ah. From that point on, Song-ah and Junyoung kept running into each other by chance. Junyoung is a quiet guy, and Song-ah is a shy girl. Whenever they met, things were always a bit awkward between them. Song-ah had faced many failures, and her family, tired of seeing her struggle, suggested she just find a regular job instead of chasing her dreams. As time went on, Song-ah got an internship at a cultural foundation managed by Chungkyung's family company. This job brought her into contact with Junyoung, Chungkyung, and Yoonho. Her boss, Young-in, assigned her to work closely with these three, which helped them start to get to know each other better. One evening, they all went out to dinner together. At dinner, Yoonho was chatty and seemed cheerful, unaware that Junyoung and Chungkyung were feeling awkward because of their hidden feelings for each other. Ironically, even though Yoonho appeared to be the happiest, he was actually the saddest. After they ate, Yoonho asked Junyoung to play a song on the piano. He turned to Song-ah for a song suggestion, and she recommended Tramirai. Soon after, Junyoung went quiet when he heard this because Tramirai was a special song for him and Chungkyung. Despite his hesitation, Yoonho insisted, and Junyoung ended up playing the song. When Chungkyung heard the song Tramirai being played, she was deeply moved. Her eyes were fixed only on Junyoung, and she didn't even think about Yoonho, who was right next to her. The song brought back a flood of memories she shared with Junyoung. Even after they left, Chungkyung couldn't stop thinking about him. Meanwhile, Junyoung had to take care of Yoonho, who had gotten drunk. As they headed to Yoonho's house, Yoonho kept talking in his tipsy state about how much he loved Chungkyung. This made her feel guilty and sad. He cared a lot about Chungkyung, but he also didn't want to hurt his best friend, Yoonho. The next day, Chungkyung tricked Junyoung into going to a music concert with her. She told him that Yoonho would be playing there, thinking Junyoung wouldn't want to miss it. At the concert, things didn't go as Chungkyung planned because Song-ah was there too. Junyoung ended up paying more attention to Song-ah than to Chungkyung. After the concert, they all went out to eat together. While they were eating, a song played in the background, and Song-ah mentioned how much she liked the song. Yoonho joked that of course all violinists would like it. Then, he asked Junyoung for his thoughts, since Junyoung is a violinist too. There, Junyoung shared that he liked the song not just for its music, but because there was a special story behind it. The story of the song was actually about the love between Chungkyung and Junyoung, something Yoonho didn't know. At that time, Junyoung didn't say much more because he didn't want to upset Yoonho. The next day, Yoonho met up with Youngin just to chat. During their conversation, Youngin mentioned that Chungkyung had gone to see Junyoung perform in America. This news made Yoonho start to suspect that Chungkyung and Junyoung were keeping secrets from him. He spent the whole night feeling worried and suspicious about what might be going on. Because Chungkyung was going to practice music with Junyoung, she didn't want Junyoung to see her wearing a wedding ring. So, she took it off before starting their session. When they were about to begin, Yoonho noticed that Chungkyung wasn't wearing the ring he had given her. It became clear to him that there was something special going on between Chungkyung and Junyoung, which really disappointed him. Everyone was mixed up because of their feelings, and sensing trouble, Junyoung quickly left the scene. Sadly, right after Junyoung left, Chungkyung ran after him, leaving Yoonho all by himself, looking very upset. However, Yoonho tried to stay strong. He even walked Chungkyung to the front to get a taxi. In the evening, Yoonho went to Junyoung's house and invited him to have a drink together. Yoonho ended up drinking a lot and got pretty drunk. Suddenly, he told Junyoung to just leave. Junyoung initially thought Yoonho was joking, but when he saw Yoonho's serious expression, he realized it was no joke. Knowing that Yoonho was heartbroken, Junyoung decided it was time to firmly end his past relationship with Chungkyung. After talking to her, Junyoung left for good. Meanwhile, Yoonho, heartbroken, continued to look at his wedding ring, feeling sad. On the other hand, Chungkyung, who had been caught, couldn't hide the truth anymore. She and Yoonho ended up having a private talk. They usually laugh together, but this time it was very awkward. Then, Yoonho started the conversation, trying to hold back tears, and his body shook from the effort. Chungkyung felt sad and guilty for hurting Yoonho, but she couldn't deny her true feelings. At that time, Yoonho told Chungkyung that she could take some time away if she needed it, but he begged her not to leave him forever. Hearing this, Chungkyung started crying and ultimately ended their relationship by saying she was sorry. Now, Yoonho was left alone. Soon after, Chungkyung went home and told her grandmother about what had happened. Chungkyung and her grandmother didn't have the best relationship because her grandmother always pressured her to take care of the family business. When her grandmother heard the story, she said Chungkyung made the right decision and even insulted Yoonho by calling him poor and looking down on him. Strangely, Chungkyung felt hurt when her grandmother insulted Yoonho, and this made her angry with her grandmother. Meanwhile, Junyoung, who kept meeting Song-ah, ended up falling for her. He admired how Song-ah stayed positive even when others put her down, and Song-ah noticed that Junyoung was always quietly supporting her. When Chungkyung learned about Junyoung's feelings for Song-ah, she felt heartbroken because her feelings for Junyoung were not returned. She tried to win him back, but it only led to more heartache. Then, Junyoung eventually told Chungkyung that it was time for her to move on and reevaluate her feelings. He pointed out that she seemed happy when she was with Yoonho, but now she was alone. This made Chungkyung start to miss Yoonho. While she was alone and thinking things over, Chungkyung heard the news that Yoonho was moving abroad. As she touched her cheek, Chungkyung remembered how Yoonho used to warm her hands and say that her hands were only cold when her heart was sad. Realizing she was indeed sad about Yoonho leaving, Chungkyung felt a deep sorrow. Her sadness grew even more when she unexpectedly learned that her grandmother had passed away. All these bad things happening one after another left Chungkyung feeling very down. At Chungkyung's grandmother's funeral, both Yoonho and Junyoung came to show their respects. They were there to support Chungkyung, and Yoonho even warmed her hands one last time, just like he used to. Besides attending the funeral, Yoonho also showed up for the anniversary of her grandmother's death, where he performed alongside Chungkyung, Junyoung, and Song-ah. After their performance, Yoonho returned a music book that Chungkyung had lent him. This made Chungkyung very sad because it meant they didn't have any more reasons to see each other. Yoonho then said goodbye and walked away. In a sudden rush of emotion, Chungkyung ran after Yoonho and asked him when he would be coming back. Yoonho replied that he didn't know, hinting that he might not return. Hearing this, Chungkyung felt really upset and cried as she watched Yoonho leave. After the funeral, Chungkyung found herself living alone and decided to become a music teacher. She spent a lot of time thinking about her past mistakes and learning from them. One day, while she was getting ready to play the violin in the music room, there was a knock at the door. To her surprise, it was Yoonho. He greeted her with a simple hello, and at first, Chungkyung was so shocked she couldn't believe it was really him standing there. Soon, she came to her senses and greeted him back. At that time, Yoonho had decided to come back, and he chose to forgive Chungkyung for everything that had happened. Now, they are ready to start their story anew. The film ends. The moral lesson from this film is if life gives you cold hands, make sure you've got a hand warmer or a forgiving ex nearby.